Welcome to Keep the Line Moving, the podcast where leadership meets life and inspiration. Here we spotlight extraordinary leaders. We're diving deep into how they inspire, motivate, and lead with strategy and empathy to achieve the extraordinary. Here we go. We are talking about the employee advantage with our guest, Stephan Meier. He is a Columbia Business School professor. He's been there since 2008. He focuses on issues at the intersection of behavioral economics, business strategy, and the future of work. He teaches the human side of strategy in the MBA program and executive education programs. His classes are business strategy and the future of work. Stephan is so much more than all that I just said. He has a great sense of humor. He has an interesting hobby that will hit right off the top. You do not want to miss this. He grew up in Switzerland, and he released a book in October called The Employee Advantage: How Putting Workers First Helps Business Thrive. For those of you who are analytics and metrics focused, he backs up everything in his book with research. He has case studies on Toyota and other companies, Fortune 500 like Costco, DHL, Best Buy, and smaller organizations. We have a conversation that you want to hear. It starts now with Stephan Meier on Keep the Line Moving. Okay, everybody, Stephan joins us. It's wonderful to have him. Stephan, I'm going to start in a non-traditional way, but I've had a lot of people talk to you about this. Those videos, those Lego videos on your website, I was almost late to our meeting here today, are so creative, so just engaging. I found myself actually laughing out loud. All right, let's go. I know people talk to you about all this, but I want to start here.
When I was starting to write my book, and I was writing my book, I'm the chair of the division here. I was teaching, I was researching. I was really, really overwhelmed. I was really stressed out. So I needed something to really calm me down, for my own sake and my wife's and my kids' sake. So I found this book in a airport bookstore that has like make your own stop motion Lego movies. I was like, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of Legos from, we have 3 kids. There's a lot of Legos that we had. I was like, all right, why not? So I bought the book, and I embarked onto this very meditative way of making stop motion with my phone. So I make it with my iPhone. And then I moved those little minifigures, one frame after another. And that's very meditative. But I figured, like, why don't I do stuff about my work and about work in general? Lego figures who do yoga, or like quiet quitting, and so on. And so I have a lot of them, and I now release them like one a month. I have a newsletter, but like I post them on my social media, and it's just a lot of fun to do this. It's very, very different from what I do in my day job, and I think that's the beauty about it. So it really detracts me from like the rigorous and sometimes serious academic work, and then I just can goof around.
So creative. I just love it. You see how when you ask people a question about creating Lego animation, your videos that you just described beautifully, you see how they respond to that question, right? And how it touched you, right? It brings out your wonderful sense of humor and like a grounded nature of you, right? Which is so important when you're interfacing with publishers and or folks that are reading your book, or because it just came out right at the end of 2024. Right. You have to have that sense of humor and that sense of being grounded. Can you talk about that just in the massive roles that you have within your professional life?
Absolutely. It is like, as you said, it's the creativity, but also kind of seeing kind of what people do beyond kind of their day job. And I now try to ask a lot of people that I work with, I mean, I don't actually ask them what are their Lego movies, but like in a certain way, kind of, but like, what do you do for fun? What is like the Lego movie equivalent where I kind of see what is this guy beyond kind of the resume or beyond like what is on their webpage? And that's as you said, people are so passionate about those things. Then you like figure out, oh, my assistant, she paints. So she has like all this beautiful art, and they're hiding it somehow. And when there's a new personality almost that comes alive, and then you see the person in a much more complete picture.
And when you find, let's take this to your work, right? And keep it on, this kind of the notion that employees are the new customers, right? We can go off in so many different directions with that concept. And your book is so comprehensive with case studies and different ways of looking. But let's just that concept right there. Employees are the new customers.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. I mean, throughout the book and how I think about it, this is kind of the mantra, or like the one. If I had to summarize it in one sentence, that would be the sentence. Now suddenly, like everybody talks about, like how can we put the customer in the center? How can we be customer centric? Or, I think Bezos is like Amazon is like one of the main examples. Where he brings an empty chair. Every meeting, every important meeting has an empty chair at Amazon, and it's reserved for the customer, which is like the most important stakeholder. And there are reasons why customers became more important, why the customer experience became more important. And I'm arguing the same trends kind of lead to employees being more important. So, for example, when you think about like 20 years ago, when you were traveling, you go like take your family to Rome, and of course you have to eat. And 20 years ago, when you would go to Rome, you would hit a lot of tourist traps, restaurants that kind of look good and are terrible. And those tourist traps nowadays are gone, because you go to TripAdvisor, review sites, the transparency on what the experience is completely transformed. Now, the same is true for when you think about the workplace. Like the Glassdoor is kind of the equivalent of TripAdvisor. Or if you screw up in your culture, it goes viral. So that's kind of the first part about employees are the new customers. That the same trends that led to customer centricity lead to employee centricity. But the other part is kind of the same tools that we use for customers can now apply to employees. I want to understand the customer. I want to be friendly to the customer. The same can be applied to our employees. So they have like some principles how to deal with disgruntled customers. You have to be empathetic. You have to put yourself in the other person's shoe, perspective taking, and so on and so forth. Well, why don't we use the same principles for our team? We already train people on like how to deal with it. Why don't we now on our team members, because there are conflicts obviously in teams, there is stuff that happens, there's difficult conversations. So kind of everybody in the organization kind of should be empowered to do something that creates a more human-centric workplace.
Okay, so let's back up. Yes, that is a perfect way of jumping off for us here today. Let's talk about you. You were an economist, like you dealt with, those strategies. At what point in your background did you realize I have a passion, perhaps an equal passion, perhaps even, Stephan, more of a passion for what we're talking about now, which is helping culture, which is a little bit broader, right? Not a little bit, it's way broader, right? These are human beings, right? And you always say that, listen, if you ask any CEO or any head of any company, they will say that people are the most valued commodity. However, we don't behave that way, hence the story you just told us. But for you personally, when did that change take place? In 2008, when you said, I'm going to devote the rest of my career this way.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, and it had a lot of couple of turns in the way. Yeah, so I actually had a master in history, but then I somehow I was a little dissatisfied with history because I wanted like a framework how to think about how humans behave, make predictions about this. And so economics became very natural because economics has a very, very strong view on how humans behave. Humans are perfectly rational and extremely self-interested, and that's kind of the model in economics. But after quite a while, I figured out, like, just from introspection, the one human I know really well, which is myself, is it's not that rational, to be perfectly honest. I make a lot of mistakes, very systematic mistakes. And I want to believe that I'm not just self-interested. So I started to study more what is now known as behavioral economics, kind of the combination of psychology and economics, and thinking about, how do humans really behave? How do they make mistakes? What motivates them deep down beyond money? And then I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston for a while in a Center for Behavioral Economics and Decision Making. And then I came to the business school. And only during the pandemic, I kind of put all those things together. I think the pandemic for me put a really bright spotlight on issues in the workplace that just don't work as well. And it became pretty clear that we assumed a lot of things that we actually can do better. And then I combined kind of thinking about, well, they're not just customer or one humans in the organization, they're the humans, the employees, the workforce. And we need to understand what actually motivates them and humanize work more. Because if you look at those engagement surveys, levels, they're miserable. So we're not doing a great job in creating good jobs. And then I became very passionate about it. Then I actually was like, I need to write a book. I want to write a book. I want to get those ideas out. And now I also do some of the teaching about that. So I kind of shifted part of my teaching as well to think about, what motivates people at work and how can technology help.
So people that know me really well and people that listen to this podcast all the time are going to be surprised at the question that I asked to follow up on what you just said. You said something incredibly interesting to me. You said, quote, "The one human I know really well is not rational," and that was you. Meaning you took a moment of introspection and you put that as a factor into as you progressed with your passion in life, which is the economist part of you, behavioral psychology, going away from history and creating, as you said, frameworks, right, to understand how we relate to one another. How much of this is the onus, the responsibility, the accountability on the employee? You had the aha moment. I'm perhaps irrational at times. I'm figuring this out. I'm self-aware right now, and I need to help the culture of my workplace. I'm as guilty as I raise my hand. We put it on the leadership, right, in developing that culture. And it's, 90-10. But what is a very good way of talking about this, you and I right now, so folks can get a lot out of this? How much is it the employee? How much is it leadership?
Yeah, I think it needs everybody in the organization. And I think you're absolutely right, Chris. Like, just saying, oh, like the executives are like terrible, or they don't understand, and that might be right. They also need they have their fair share of responsibility, but we all can actually create a better culture. Like, one of the motivators, for example, that I talk about is I call it working together works. And or like psychology terms would be like relatedness. And I think you can relate well to, if you're in sports, you work on a team, you play in a team that really works well, you can achieve stuff that is like unthinkable, and it's all about like how the team works together. Now, obviously, a team needs a good coach and a good captain or a leader, and that's responsible. But everybody is responsible for having those, positive social interaction with each other and supporting each other, understanding what my team member, how my team member ticks. Now, I personally start often from introspection. I have like good intentions, so probably the others also have good intention. Let's start with that instead of assuming that like everybody is out there to get me. And so there is a lot of, like, as you said, responsibility of every single person in the organization, wherever you are in the hierarchy, to think about how can we humanize work. And social interactions are a really important part of it. Trust, is another one. Like, and you can think about it like, well, how does the leader trust this team? That's right. But also, how do we trust each other? How to empower each other?
So, Stephan, to that point, micromanaging, remote work, there's so many complexities that you write about. Why? And I'm going to ask you this, and I'm going to tee it up because I know how you think, but let's share with folks your philosophy, hypothesis, and research-based conclusions. Why do people leave companies? We all say bad bosses. That's true. But you have other reasons as well, correct?
Yeah, there are a bunch of other reasons why people leave. Bad bosses or like toxic environments and whatever is definitely one of them. But there are other reasons. I think, and I think the research backs this up, and I talk about this in the book, is like there are four motivators beyond money. So I already talked about the working together works, and that's kind of where bosses kick in. There are three more. So one is purpose, having a higher purpose, meaning, impact. I think there are very few people who get up in the morning and think like, today I'm gonna help increase the return on invested capital for my company by 1%. I mean, there might be some, but most people, are jazzed when it's like, today I'm gonna make the world a tiny bit better. Today I'm like solving a really important problem that hopefully makes the business also successful at one point, but the primary motivation is this higher purpose and meaning. The second is autonomy. People are very empowered by, being empowered, having autonomy. And the flip side is trust. You kind of need trust to do that. From the other side, from either your team member or from the manager. And last, I think, but not least, is what I call just right tasks or like competence. If people are bored or they're underutilized or overstretched, then they are frustrated and they leave. Most people leave because there's organization, because they're stuck. They don't learn anything new, they don't develop, and as a result they're either bored or like look for new opportunities. And I think leaders on every level can actually do something to tackle that.
Stephan, these are great. 4 principles: purpose, autonomy, competence, social relationships. But I want to drill down on something you said that is so interesting to me. So let's let's paint a picture for folks, okay? Let's visualize here. Individual drives into the parking lot of their established workplace, right? The building's right there, whether it's, getting off the subway in Manhattan or it's a remote, a remote situation. It could be anything. You're right. They woke up, they had thoughts in their head. You're right, Stephan, you're right. That people don't wake up thinking, okay, I'm going to increase the ROI of the said initiative. Maybe some do, but most likely they want to be part, as you said, of something with a higher purpose. And here's where I go with this, and tell me if you agree. Not only the higher purpose thoughts for those, but they don't have ill intention. They're not nefarious in behavior, right? I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say this and make sure they feel uncomfortable. That, right? Think about this.
Yeah.
The psychology, you're the expert. The psychology of human beings, as you said, they want to be something greater than what they're part of as an individual, right? Being part of something greater than themselves. But why, 10 minutes into it, do we devolve into something we're not proud of? What happens? What is that dynamic, the trigger?
Yeah, where it really comes from fundamentally, it's hard to tell, but I do think that we have this wrong view about like how humans actually behave in the workplace. And one of those myths is, and I do think economics and the economic thinking is at fault somehow, because for like decades, the view of economics and also the training we do in business schools, for example, is like, humans are, as I said before, not only just rational, they're self-interested, and work sucks. The model kind of say, I only work for pay or when I'm controlled, and if I don't, I slack off. And that's kind of the model. If you don't incentivize people enough, they would not do it, because work is painful. Sucks is like nobody wants to do it, and you have to then either control or heavily incentivize. And when you have that view of a human in mind, you can never trust, because I can't give you autonomy, because if I let you do your own thing, I know you're going to slack off, because that's what the model says. And I think we need to change that narrative. I need to change that. Yeah, I mean, people obviously, also want a life, but like a lot of people go to work and get something more out of it than just a paycheck. It's identity, meaning, structure. They get a lot out of a good workplace, and they would actually do so. They work even if you don't control them, and if you organize it in the right way, you're getting a lot of productivity, engagement, and motivation out of it. But Chris, to your point, once you're in this mindset of like people are just don't want to work or are lazy or slackers, it's very, very hard to get out of this with not like, oh, now I need to control you. Chris, when he shows up, I'm sure he wants to like slack off. So let's make sure that I surveil him, I control him, I incentivize everything. And that then creates those terrible workplaces.
You know what? I buried the lead a little bit here. Your doctoral thesis was on non-selfish behavior and implication for organizations. When I saw that, I'm going to be honest with you, envious. One, that I haven't got my doctorate yet. And, you're never too old or whatever. I might someday do that. But I'm envious of that incredible topic. Just one sentence. So you went into it with a hypothesis, right, into your doctorate about non-selfish behavior and its implication for organizations. You did the doctoral thesis. You had a conclusion backed up by research. Now, many years later, where are you with your thesis?
I mean, I still back then, and again, I came from like a view, the theory or the what I was indoctrinated in is like people are selfish. And so I then started to maybe let's assume they're not. Let's study when they're not. And what I mean with that, when do they help each other without the financial benefit? When they, share information? When do they volunteer? And then we can think about all those pro-social activities that we do where we help others or the community without like thinking, oh, I'm just helping Chris because, he might help me afterwards because I just want to help him. And so that's what I study. So I studied in my thesis kind of under what condition is this more prevalent or not. And I still think, and all the research I did over the years still show that, like, people are fundamentally really good. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is Mother Teresa. I mean, I'm for sure not Mother Teresa myself. Obviously people look, if they make choices, like what helps them as well. And like they look how to support their family and make sure that their family is doing well. But like humans are remarkable animals who help others who are genetically not related to them. When you look at the animal kingdom, most creatures, help obviously, their offspring, their genetically related relatives. But humans are incredible in like they collaborate, cooperate, help people that are not genetically related. And that's a remarkable thing. So I'm still very, very bullish And the research that I do shows this. People are fundamentally good. There are obviously situations where, and you have to manage this in a certain way, because I don't want to be the sucker, but fundamentally, I think people have this very strong, very positive tendency to help each other.
Oh, that's tremendous. That's really well put. Have you ever seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life? The saying at the end is, George Bailey, the richest man in town, meaning he was rewarded for that giving nature. You don't have to be a sucker. People are fundamentally good. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I'm throwing that out there to you. Do you remember the movie? And I don't mean to put you
I
on the
now
spot.
remember. Yeah. Now remember the movie. Yeah, I agree. And uh, it's rewarding, and it will come back. And it is, they are like those small things you can do on a daily basis. And like, if I think back about like the work setting, and like going back to kind of the customer or employees, or employees are the new customers, where when you ask a marketing executive, whether it's a good idea to ask your customer once a year how they're doing, they're going to laugh their asses off. They're like, no, I need constant feedback. Now in the workplace, we kind of do that. We ask our employees once a year with engagement surveys. Now, what does that mean for? And I think we shouldn't. We should actually get more insights, more feedback. Now, for an individual, as a team member, what does that mean? Is like spending more time with individuals, because now I understand. So Chris is on my team, and I now have a conversation with her, like, Chris, how are you doing? What is on your mind? Like, what frustrates you? And as a result, I learn, what frustrates you, and I can actually do better as a coworker, as a manager, as a team member. And that's giving, not in money, but it's time is actually nowadays in particular, is a very scarce resources, and giving time is, I think, is rewarding for, the person who receives time. But I think as a result, you actually get something back. So I agree. Giving, and you will get back eventually.
Agreed. Okay.
Absolutely.
Are you ready for All-Star Moments?
I think so.
We will get to All-Star Moments in just a second. To grow as a leader, you must make intentional choices about how you want to show up for yourself and your team. Are you ready to grow your leadership? The Gargano Leadership Group offers expert coaching, consulting, and workshops rooted in our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. Leadership starts with forging authentic connections, communicating your values, leading with energy and enthusiasm, and truly understanding yourself. Visit garganoleadership.com to get started with us today. Back to the show. Here we go. Question number 1. Your favorite comedian?
Trevor Noah.
Okay. Favorite vacation spot?
Let's say Switzerland.
Your hometown. That's great. Or home country, I should say. Okay. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie, the Lego movie.
That's awesome. I remember watching that with my son. That was great. What would be your number 1 piece of advice for first-time leaders?
I think listening and getting feedback from the team members that you manage is critically important.
Ego in leadership. What advice would you give to somebody to manage one's ego?
Yeah, leave it at the door when you go to a meeting.
How would you describe yourself as a leader in 1 sentence?
I mean, I really try to listen and empower my team and support them in getting the best out of them.
Works for me. Stephan, this has been unbelievable. I could talk to you all afternoon, and this has been great.
Same here. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
And we thank Stephan very much for being on the show. I have several takeaways from this conversation. Let's start with a big one. The employees are the new customers. Remember what Stephan said during this conversation, and he also writes about it, which is this: We ask our customers surveys all the time. Fill this out. What did you think of this? Yet, we ask our employees to do such surveys maybe once or twice a year about culture. Do you enjoy working here? What can we do better? Think about that just for a second. And we also talked about, you heard Stephan say, and we ask our employees, and we say it, what is our number one commodity that we value here at this workplace? Invariably, the answer is always people. Yet we don't ask them how we're doing. Be thoughtful about how we're listening and how we're engaging with our employees to get the most out of them so they don't leave jobs because they're bored or uninspired or are not purpose driven or not given empowering tasks and trust is lacking. We always appreciate it each and every week. Everybody subscribe, put the thumbs up, follow, recommend the podcast. You know we appreciate it. Have a great week, everybody. Take care on Keep the Line Moving. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.